Welcome to this episode of Write the World. I'm your host, Lorana Hoopes, and this is the show where we talk to lots of different authors and writers, and we find out all about all sorts of genres and wonderful books that you should be reading. And today I'm so excited to have Margaret McConnell on the show. Margaret, I actually met through my blog, twoheartbeats.org, when I posted her first book, Spooning Daisy, and it was fantastic. I absolutely loved this book. So welcome, Margaret.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Thank you so much.
So you and I have been talking before, and you are evidently on a ranch. Am I right?
I'm on a ranch. I think that cut out a little bit. You said I'm on a ranch, right?
Yes.
In Arizona.
In Arizona. Tell us a little bit about this ranch. Like, what is this? This keeps you busy, I'm sure.
Well, it does. Actually, I've been here now probably 13 years. I'm originally from Alaska. And let's see, I don't know if I should talk about this or not. I was going to say my husband was the original one who wanted to come and live on a ranch. And I got the ranch in the divorce, ironically. So I ended up with the ranch. But it works out because I had horses in Alaska. And Alaska really is not a great place for horses. I mean, it takes a lot of commitment. It's cold a lot. And, they were in a stable.
Oh, yeah.
And fortunately, we were near riding trails, but I had kind of a rule there that if it got about 10 degrees, we wouldn't go out on trail. But anything 10 degrees or above, we would all bundle up. And I had riding buddies there, and riding as opposed to writing buddies, and we would hit the trails. But this is much nicer. They have 36 acres where they can roam and be horses, and I back up to state land, so I can also go riding on state land when I get a chance. But yep, it is. I mean, it really is. It's beautiful out here. I'm sitting here in the dining room looking out at the San Francisco Peaks. If anyone knows anything about Arizona, San Francisco Peaks are near Flagstaff, and I have great views, and it's high desert, not a lot of rain, but very beautiful.
Sort of the opposite of where I am, where it is a lot of rain all the time.
And actually, I'm very familiar with Washington. I have friends in Washington, my sister's in Washington, and for a few years we owned land up in Port Townsend. So we've been.
Port Townsend is beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's quaint. I mean, it's just an adorable town.
Yes,
it really is. I love the downtown. I love the little shops, and I guess they have all sorts of rules that you can't have a Walmart there, and you can't have,
I didn't know that.
They actually have all sorts of codes for what they allow to come into that city, so they keep it very Port Townsend-ish. So, yeah, Washington's beautiful. I love Washington. Love the trees.
Awesome. Yeah, the trees are really nice. My mother hates them. I'm originally from Texas, and every time she comes to visit, she's like, there's so many trees. I'm like, oh my gosh, mother. She complains about the trees every time. But now, I did not know that you had originally lived in Alaska. Is that where you got the inspiration for Spooning Daisy? Because there's parts of it that are set in Alaska.
It is. And actually, Otter Bite, which is the fictional town where Spooning Daisy is set, and actually where the series is set, is based on Saldovia, Alaska, which is across the bay from Homer, Alaska, which is about a 4-hour drive south from Anchorage, Alaska. And now I'm probably hitting cities that people know.
Right.
So there, people probably know 3 cities in Alaska. That's Anchorage, Juneau, and Fairbanks. They probably all know those. But there are a whole lot of other little small towns and villages. And Saldovia is, I think Saldovia has maybe, I'm going out on a limb here, it's under 1,000 people, I'm sure, and it might be even less than that. But the only access to Saldovia is by boat or by plane, by small plane. And my husband at the time and I would used to fly down in his plane from Anchorage to Saldovia in the landing strip, and we had a place on McDonald's Spit. And I love Saldovia. I think it's just quaint. It's beautiful. The spit is wonderful, and that's where I set. So that's where I set the series, because it is just one of those great small town kind of places, and plus it's got some quirkiness to it because it's in Alaska.
Right. Now, did it have mainly men, like in the book alludes to? I hear this a lot, that there's a lot of men in Alaska.
They're not. When I first went to Alaska, the ratio between men and women actually was much greater. I mean, there were quite a few more men than there were women when I first came to Alaska. Now it's not so much. Now I think it's pretty evenly split. And Saldovia has a lot of families in it. It's not just a whole bunch of single men.
Okay.
Wandering around. Yeah. It's now there are a lot of families. They have schools, they have libraries. It's just like a mini town, mini version of towns. It's got all the stuff that other towns have, just not quite as many of them. So
right, exactly. Now, Max is the character in your book, and he was also a pilot. Was he sort of inspired from your husband?
Well, flying is such an important part of Alaskan living. I mean, it is, I think, boy, I wish I had the statistics now, but I think they say that Alaska has the most private pilots anywhere.
Oh, wow.
In the U.S. I mean, it has the small Merrill Field is where most small plane lands, and it has, I think it's recorded as one of the busiest private licensed pilots in the U.S. I mean, it's a huge airport, and it's got a lot of people, and basically a lot of people fly in Alaska, right. And there are a lot of planes in Alaska, and it was such an important part of my life for 22 years that it just seems to be, and it's something that not everybody knows how to do or knows a lot about, and so it's something that I was fortunate enough to know quite a bit about, to include, so that it makes the story somewhat more interesting than just, a lot of romances that don't have some of those unusual things about them. So
right, the characteristics that really make it stand out. Yeah, I know a little bit about
Alaskan. Makes it very Alaskan. Yeah.
My husband has his private pilot's license. When he joined the Air Force, originally he wanted to fly, but he's slightly color deficient and they wouldn't let him fly. But weirdly, he can fly small planes. So he actually proposed up in an airplane. So that was kind of cool when we first got married.
So
okay.
I have to ask, do you have a plane, or now does he have a plane?
He would love to have a plane. Maybe one of these days, if my writing ever takes off, and
your writing ever takes off.
No, he goes and rents them occasionally when he wants to go fly. We've got a small airport here that rents little planes, so he can go out and keep his license up, and so he'll go up for a couple hours, every couple of months, and he'll fly around. But no, we don't have a plane yet. It's on his wish list though, one of these days. So he would want to get something big enough that we could fly back, because my family lives in Texas still, and his family lives in California. So he's like, if I ever get a plane, let's get something big enough that we can actually like fly to Texas and we can fly to California. I'm like, all right, yep, we'll put that on our dream list one of these days. Okay, so I have to ask you, what was the hardest part about living in Alaska? Was it the weird time difference? Because I've heard that you guys have like really long nights and really short days and long winters. Like, what was the hardest part of living in Alaska?
I think it was probably feeling a little bit of isolation. The hours have never bothered me. The darkness has never bothered me. The perpetual daylight in the summer has never bothered me. But I remember the first year I was there, I ended up driving basically there's only two ways to drive in Alaska. You either go south, which ends up being a dead end at Homer,
right,
or go north in order to get out of Alaska. You have to, basically they're just two roads, north and south. So it was that feeling that my feeling, again, it was just kind of the first year I was there, just feeling like almost claustrophobic that I was stuck in Anchorage. And that was the hardest part. But then I got over that. And I just remember driving a lot the first year, like driving out to the airport and kind of looping around the city, just being able to drive somewhere. But that, I think that really was, when I had horses, the hardest part was that it was when it got really cold.
Yeah.
And having to actually be out in it. I mean, I was always out in it because I skied, and I was always, I had no problem walking the dog in it, and, I was outdoors a lot, but it was hard having horses there, just because it could get so bitterly cold and you were kind of forced to be in it. And I just bought a lot of those glove hand warmers. You know what those are, that you kind of
warm them up and
they burst into warmth, and you just, so I kept those in my gloves and those in my boots, that kind of thing. But otherwise, really, I didn't find Alaska hard at all. I think there used to be kind of a saying, you either love Alaska or you hate Alaska. There are no in-betweens. And I think that was true. The people I ran into either just could not wait to get out, or they just couldn't imagine leaving. So,
is there anything that you miss about Alaska?
Well, I think I probably miss everything about Alaska. I mean, I loved Alaska. I still love Alaska. I think it's just a beautiful state. You know what I miss about Alaska, which is really different than Arizona? Alaska has a very youthful energy.
Ah.
And Arizona has a very unyouthful energy. Based on the population of Alaska tends to be much younger.
Yeah.
And the population in Arizona is much older. And there seems to be a different energy to Alaska than to Arizona. And so I probably, if I, other than the fact that I just think Alaska is gorgeous, and, it's just a beautiful place, I probably miss the energy that Alaska has from having so many young people, much younger people than the Arizona people. So.
Absolutely. So you're Spooning Daisy. You said this is part of a series. So is this the first book in the series, or did I miss were there books before? This is the first book. Okay. And how many books do you have planned in this series?
Well, I'm currently on book 2.
Okay.
And I think the series, it probably depends a little bit on the publisher and, what sales are like, and if people can kind of get a hold of Spooning Daisy and Otter Bite and really kind of like it enough to continue. But in the second book of Embracing Felicity, I set up probably 3 more potential books.
Okay.
So it just really kind of depends. I think there was originally plans for 3 of these, and I guess we'll see. So.
Okay. So what can you tell us a little bit about what's Embracing Felicity going to be about? Because I guess I should probably tell a little bit about what Spooning Daisy is about for people who haven't read it. So Spooning Daisy follows this cook, Daisy, who after a terrible relationship, she's a chef. I'm sorry. She's a chef. She makes a big deal about
Daisy
that.
would be quite offended by calling her a cook. So
she would. She's a chef. And she ends up losing her restaurant when she and her boyfriend have a split. And she goes off to work in Alaska because it's pretty much the only place she can get hired after having a sort of an emotional meltdown in her restaurant. And she ends up in this small town in Alaska. And so when Felicity comes in, do they ever meet? Is there going to be that sort of crossover, or is it just still taking place in the town, but not necessarily at the tavern?
Yes, they do meet. Felicity is actually part Alutiiq. So she's a native. Her father is full native, and her mother was a white beauty pageant. And Felicity ends up being just incredibly gorgeous, but she lives in Otter Bite. This is where she wants to live, and she owns a little, and this might be interesting for you actually, because I know your background. You certainly have a biblical background to some extent.
I do.
She has this curio shop named Fluke 11:9.
Okay.
And it's spelled capital F, capital L, UKE 11:9. Anyway, so she has that little curio shop in Otter Bite, Alaska, and what happens is somebody comes knocking on her door one morning, and she's out in this spit, which is McDonald's spit, but it's called Bobrovy spit, which is there's a Russian influence in Otter Bite, and there's actually a Russian influence in Saldovia as well.
Interesting.
But anyway, it turns out this guy turns out to be someone she knew 17 years ago when she was studying sea otters in Scotland. And his name is Ian McIntyre, and he has a 10-year-old daughter, Emily. And it turns out that they knew each other back then before he was married and before he had Emily. And so she's actually a local of Otter Bite. And so, yes, the original question was, does she know Daisy? And it turns out she actually dated Max at one time. So there's that.
Everybody dated Max at one time.
Yeah, well, who wouldn't want to date Max? You probably wouldn't want to date Max, but I would want to date Max. But as it turns out, so yes, she does know Daisy, and they are friends with Daisy. And well, I can't tell you that. That's a spoiler. I don't want to tell you that.
Yeah, don't spoil it.
I know. I don't want to tell you that. But so yes, she does know Daisy. She does know Max, and she knows pretty much all the characters in Otter Bite. And Ian turns out to be the newbie in town for the summer, but he works for Knox Oil and Gas, so he's an oil person. And there's some friction there because Felicity, is an otter person and a wildlife person and an environmentalist, and so that sets up some problems with their relationship there. So
absolutely. Okay, so on this Felicity book, you're probably not going to get to do this either, but are you going to get to have more input on your cover, do you think?
I doubt it.
Okay, so you have to show. Do you have Spooning Daisy there with you?
I do have Spooning Daisy with me. Oh no.
We'll have to show it so that we can talk about it. Okay, do you have to take your hand down?
Oh, there it is.
Okay,
so see that?
So Spooning Daisy, this was not the cover that Margaret originally wanted, but this is what and do you go by Maggie? Should I be calling you Maggie? Because that's what's on your book.
Oh, my author's name is Maggie, but most of my friends call me Margaret.
Oh, okay.
Well, I thought Maggie just made a better author's name, romance author's name. So anyway,
my brother just called me and he said, "I think you should go by LL instead of Lorraine." Okay.
Yeah, that's what I should go back. I need the tie though for the cover if I go by EL. So
okay. So this book cover is not exactly what you wanted, and you've actually had a lot of people talk to you about the cover, right? Is what you were telling me earlier.
I would say a number of people had kind of mentioned that they didn't really think the cover was all that great, that it didn't necessarily reflect the book. The cover looked somewhat simple and almost teenagerish, that it wasn't necessarily something for adults.
Yeah, because this is an adult romance, and you've got some sex in this book, and it looks really, really pure. I mean, it almost looks like a cover that would go in one of my books, that doesn't have any sex in it. So I'm like, But I remember when reading your book, because I looked at the cover too, and I thought, oh, okay, it's going to be, sort of a cheesy romance. And your book is anything but a cheesy romance. Like, it's really, really well written. And Daisy is such a spitfire that I remember that being my initial reaction. That I was like, this just doesn't look like Daisy at all to me. Like, she seems way too sweet in this book. And not that she isn't a sweet character, but she's such a spitfire. I wanted her to look a little tougher, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did, in the book she has curls. I mean,
Yes.
kind of spirals, red spirals. And I did ask, I said, could you at least make her hair have kind of a spiral? I mean, okay, here's the book. Does that not look like a squirrel has chewed on her hair?
I didn't think that.
I look at this and I think, oh my gosh, she would have hair like this. I mean, for gosh sake, cut the thing,
Yeah.
trim it out, do something with it. But, and I was told, no, they don't know how to do spirals. So, which is kind of surprising given that it's a major publisher.
Right.
Can't seem to figure out how to do spirals. But yes, I do. I mean, it looks like a squirrel has chewed on her hair, that, got a hold of it and started munching. So
it doesn't really look like Max to me either. Can you tell me what you envisioned for Max? Like,
Tom Selleck.
Yes.
Tom Selleck in his Magnum PI days.
Okay.
So try to hold that image while you're reading this. It's, this is actually Tom Selleck.
There you go. Okay, and who would we compare Daisy to? I mean, I know she has these.
Oh, I know who it was. Oh gosh, I can't think. She's give me time and it'll pop into my mind as we talk. I'm seeing her. I can't think of her name. She's a current actress, and she's been in several movies that I can't think of what her name is. Oh darn.
We'll come back to it. It'll pop up in your head, and then you'll just be like, bam! You'll just yell it out.
Quick, let me just go Google real quick. Here. Oh, no.
I'll Google that for you.
Amy Adams. Yes, she has the red hair, and I'm trying to think of the movies she was in. She's been in. She was one, and I can't think of the name, Deborah Messing, where she had to go to England to her sister's wedding, and she hired an escort who was Dylan McDermott.
Oh, yes.
And Amy Adams was the sister who was getting married. And she actually did, what else did she do? Did she do Enchanted? She also did a...
that's what I was thinking. Was it Ella Enchanted? It
wasn't Ella Enchanted. It was just, I think it was just something like Enchanted, where she came off the book, out of the fairy tale book, and she did that. And I'm trying to think of other ones that she's been in. She's been in several movies that I like. She did one where she went, and I can't think of what the date was, where she went to Ireland to surprise her boyfriend, and she ended up having all sorts of trouble and ended up with this Irish guy who had to help her get to like Dublin or something. Anyway, she ended up falling in love with him instead and breaking up with her original fiance. And I can't think of, it was Matthew Good was the other guy, and he's been in several U.S. television shows, and The Good Wife was the last one he was in, and he was on Downton Abbey. That's it. He was. If you ever watched Downton Abbey,
I've seen a few. My parents love them though.
In the last season, he ended up being Mary's husband. For anybody who out there who watches Downton Abbey, that's Matthew Good. Anyway, he's a cutie too, and he's actually Irish.
Do you often have pictures of famous people in your head when you're starting to create your characters?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a lot easier that way.
One of these days when they become movies, you can be like, okay, so this should be Amy McAdams, or this should be Amy Adams, and this should be, well, Tom Selleck and Amy Adams, there's a bit of an age difference there.
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably won't work now, but, Tom Selleck will always be Magnum PI to me. He'll never age to the point that, he's not good.
That's very true. That's very true. Okay, so other than the cover though, I mean, have you enjoyed working with a traditional publisher? Because I talked to a lot of indie authors. I've talked to a few traditional authors, and it's interesting to see the differences. But other than not really getting to have much selection on your cover, how's the rest of your experience been with your traditional publisher?
I think good. I think it's made me appreciate how much goes into it. Then I'm thinking, boy, do I really want to do that on my own?
Right.
Just in terms of the editing. And then with ebook now, my understanding is, and I don't know, you're not traditionally published?
No, I'm an indie.
Okay. So you can probably tell me this. Is there not a lot of formatting that goes into ebooks?
There is, but I have found this fantastic site called Pressbooks. And pressbooks.com, you can put your words in there. It does all of your formatting for you. And then you can actually export your Mobi, your EPUB, your PDF, your HTMLs. It's amazing. And they run sales pretty much every month, every couple of weeks. So it costs me about $60 to format, but I can then format my book in all the different areas, so I can upload it anywhere, which makes it really nice.
Wow, that's good to know. Actually, one of my critique partners is thinking of self-publishing, and I'm going to pass that on to her.
Yeah, it's amazing. Because I figured out how to do my PDFs through CreateSpace. That wasn't too hard because they have their own templates. But when I went to try to put them in Ingram, they don't work because the font won't embed correctly. So I was like, what am I going to do? And then, trying to convert from a PDF to a Mobi or an EPUB, there's all sorts of online things that say they convert, but I never found one that actually worked. But Pressbooks has been amazing because I just put it in, I export it, I click the ones I want to export, and then I get the files, and they look great. There's lots of different formats I can choose from, so I can add the little swirlies, I can add, different elements.
I love those swirlies.
I love the swirlies, yeah. And if you write code, I'm not a coder, so if you write code, you can do even more with it, but I just stick with the elements that are already there. But yeah, it's definitely worth, if you're an indie publisher, looking into, because it's probably the best format I've found to be able to just quickly, easily do it and be able to get my exports whenever I need them in whatever format.
So I've appreciated that, and I also appreciate a copy editor. I mean, the copy editor that worked with me was great. I mean,
yeah,
just getting everything right, getting the punctuation right. They didn't do actually they did very, very, very little editing on the book itself from the time that it was submitted. But there is French in there, and they make sure all my French is correct. And that was great. So the copy editor, long story short, I guess I appreciate the labor that goes into getting the book done to where you can actually send it out. And so in that regard, the other stuff seems a little daunting to me, to try to worry about a copy editor and then worry about the formatting. And but by far and away, my cover would be better. So
yeah. Well, and covers are still, that's probably been the hardest part for me. I hire someone on Fiverr because I've tried Photoshop, I've tried InDesign. I'm like, I can't figure this out. I think if I had someone sitting with me and showing me, I'd be fine. But I hire someone on Fiverr, and I've found really good cover artists, which has been nice. But anytime I make changes and I have to resize it, then I'm waiting on my cover designer to resize it. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of frustrating. I wish that I could just do it myself, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. That's on my list of things I'll educate myself in eventually when I get time. But with 3 small children, that's not often.
If I had a choice of cover, I do have a picture from iStock, a photograph from iStock on my website for Embracing Felicity, that if I could have the cover of my choice, I would choose that one. Because it actually fits perfectly. I just happened to find 2 people that looked really great, and she's wearing Wellingtons on a beach. I mean, how much
that's awesome.
could that be? So other than that, I've certainly learned from my publisher in terms of promotion, that kind of thing. So Yeah, I don't know that it would, and for an author starting out like I am, I always feel like it's beneficial to have a traditional publisher, but I don't know that it would be beneficial. I mean, I think there are a lot of authors that once they're traditionally published and have a following, that they then go independent, and I can certainly see the pluses of that. So.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, if you can hit the market right, I think there's definitely a lot more money and freedom when you can publish yourself, because I can go in and make changes anytime I want to my book and upload new changes, and it's literally, 72 hours and they're up there.
Mm-hmm.
And I know with a traditional publisher, it's a little bit harder if you're like, oh, I really wish I didn't put in this scene, and you've got to go through a whole long process. There's definitely a lot of freedom in that, which I really like. But so what's something that you have learned from your publisher? You said about promotion was really important for people who are getting started. I think book promotion is probably the biggest and hardest hurdle. So what's something that you've learned that you could share with our readers?
Well, it's probably simple, but I had no idea there were such a thing as virtual book tours.
Me either.
So the release of Daisy was, they immediately set it up before it was released. They set up to go on a virtual book tour for 6 weeks, along with 3 other romances that were being released around I think either on the same day or certainly around the same time.
Okay.
And that sort of got me started realizing that, oh my gosh, there are like 3 million bloggers out there on books, and not necessarily just romance, but I mean, I just had no idea that world existed out there, and or how to get reviews. I didn't know anything about NetGalley, for instance,
Right.
and letting people review it for free, having that kind of thing. I really didn't know anything about Goodreads. I mean, maybe I've heard about it. I mean, I thought Amazon was it, that's where everybody went. But there are just a lot of different avenues that authors can go to, and a lot of resources authors can use on their own. It's time consuming to do that all by yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
But and actually, Romance Writers of America does a lot of little mini, I don't know what you call them, little mini workshops that are usually free for members. And
right.
One of them I took was how to use Goodreads and how to benefit from Goodreads. And so I don't do that, but I could.
Realize it yet, but I have the knowledge.
But if I ever have the time to really do that, so I think that was really helpful too, and that just kind of then you just kind of get to expand that on your own, and you just start to. So yeah, I would say the virtual tour for me certainly has been helpful, and it's not terribly expensive. So,
right. Yeah, that was actually really nice. I ran a promo through Fiverr and it didn't do a whole lot. So I'm excited to see what a tour does. I've got The Power of Prayer, which is going to be touring next week. So I'm excited about that. It's actually going to tour on 2 different sites. So we'll see how that goes. But I wanted to bring up one more thing, and this is something you said in an email to me, but I think it would be really helpful for people who are booking these, is you said that one of the best things to do is to have an unusual prize that you give away, right? Because a lot of people just throw up a gift card or whatever. Why do you think it's the unusual prize that really stands out to them?
This is interesting because the first time I did it, I just did it because I try to get prizes that are associated with the book,
right? That
are associated with the story in some way. Daisy actually turned out to be pretty easy because there are a lot of Daisy things. Marc Jacobs has a Daisy fragrance, and so I've given that away several times. And I didn't know this going into it, but the first time I did the prizes, the tour operators emailed me, said, "Gosh, those are some great prizes," because most people always just get a gift certificate. And while gift certificates are wonderful, getting something unique, unusual is a lot of fun, and people actually pay attention to that. They see that. And so I kind of stumbled onto that, but ever since then, I've continued to have prizes, giveaways that somehow reflect the book, which includes Alaska, or somehow reflect the characters or the story, have something to do with this, like the upcoming tour I have right now. And this might be a little bit of a spoiler alert, but I have a pin that represents one of the characters in the book.
Oh,
Which is,
interesting.
yeah, it is interesting. Well, if I'll give you one of the hosts, and you can look on and see the pin, and you will know exactly right away what that is. But I also have a vegan leather purse that has, and it's from Nordstrom. I get most of my stuff from Nordstrom, so this is good stuff. That has daisies all over it on the front of it. And then I have, what was the other prize? I have one other that reflects that name. Oh, I have a star from, I think it's Rebecca Minkoff, who has a star pendant. And if you may remember from the book that there are stars involved in the story.
Right, yes.
So, and then I also, for the hostess giveaway, I usually have two different ones, and they don't necessarily have to reflect the book because who cares? But, but for the readers, I like to have something that reflects the book. So, so I think, for the last time I went on tour, I had something like 1,800 entries. So even if 1,800 people don't necessarily buy that book, there are 1,800 people that at least saw the promo enough to go down and look at the prizes.
Enter.
And, who knows, maybe at some point, maybe sometime later on, they'll, the book will come up again and they'll think, oh, I remember that. But so I think that kind of reflects, the interest in the readers of whether those are prizes that the giveaways are something that they, might like. And I did have, interestingly enough, though, I did have one of the hosts, Sasha Darlington, I remember, because she won the wallet that I had for the host, and she said, I never myself enter these for the host prizes, but you had such unusual gifts that ironically, for the first time in a long time, I actually entered it. And she ended up, winning. It wasn't exactly the grand prize, but it was kind of the first prize, because I thought it was a neat, happy wallet, and it was vegan leather, which I'm really big on. So, I thought that was interesting feedback from a hostess too.
Yeah. Well, I ended up winning your necklace.
I know.
Daisy necklace, and it was beautiful when it came in. I was like, oh, this is really, really nice. And so, yeah, it was really cool to win something that was not just, like you said, gift cards are nice, but it was nice to win something that I was like, oh, when I look at this necklace, I think of your book. And then I'm like, oh, I want to go see, what Daisy and Max are doing, and I might go back through and read a little bit. And I'm using your book for inspiration too. So, I really enjoyed your style of writing. And so I look back when I'm stuck on something, I'm like, oh, how did she handle like time jumps? Because I have a lot of time I have to cover in one of my books. So it was really nice. So tell us your websites. Give us some of your websites. I will also have a link. I'm going to put this video on the old promo from Spooning Daisy from a few months ago, but I'm also going to put it on the new one because I know you've got another tour coming up. So this video will actually be linked on both. And I know your websites are on that, but for the viewers who are watching, give us a couple of your websites of where they can find you and where they can find your book, and I'll make sure and link them in an article underneath as well.
So the website's easy. It's MaggieMcConnellRomance.com.
Okay, that one is easy.
Yeah, it is easy. And then they can follow the author me on Maggie McConnell Romance on Facebook.
Okay.
And I don't have any idea what all the numbers are behind my Margaret McConnell Facebook page is, but that has if you can find me, because it's surprising how many Margaret McConnells there are. I don't know how many Loranas there are out there, but Margaret McConnells are a lot more than one that I would ever think. But I do have a Facebook page for just my personal stuff, and that tends to have a lot of videos and pictures of the ranch and of the animals, and that's fun. I try to keep the Maggie McConnell romance Facebook about reading, or about Alaska, something like that, about the books. Or something Alaskan. I try to keep that, but the other one has a lot more interesting stuff, I think. I wish I could figure out how to consolidate the two, actually, so I don't have to keep posting on both of them, because
two different places. I totally hear you. So
it takes so much time.
Now that you're in Arizona, and we didn't talk about this, but I'm just curious, as a final question, do you plan a series set in Arizona anytime in the future with your horses and your inspiration?
I'm actually thinking about kind of veering off into women's fiction.
Okay.
A little bit. And I would kind of like to do a women's fiction set in Arizona. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm not a fast writer. I just, talk about one of the characters in Spooning Daisy. I'm about as slow as that one. So we're both pretty slow. Elizabeth and I are pretty slow. So I don't know, but that's kind of what my thoughts are right now. Right now, I just would like to get Embracing Felicity, to let that see light, and we'll see what happens. So.
All right. Well, we will look forward to that. And I want to say thank you again so much for coming on the show. It was such a pleasure to talk with you and to share a little bit about your book. And I will make sure, for all of you watching, that we have all the links up so you guys can come and check it out. And make sure that you join us next week right here on Write the World. We'll have another amazing guest and another great book that you need to check out. I'm your host, Lorana Hoopes, saying thank you and good day.